This is the Unique Scotland podcast with exclusive scottishvisits.co.uk.
Hello, this is John Harbour from Exclusive Scottish Visits, and welcome to my podcast called Unique Scotland. The next official podcast is going to be on the clan system, but this is a little added extra called Letter from Scotland. This letter brings you the latest news from this wonderful country, Scotland, that puts the great into Britain. It gives you an insight into what makes this tiny country tick. It takes newsprint, TV and radio commentary and turns it into a bite-sized viewpoint from a local perspective with a slightly humorous edge. Well, it's November now. The rain is doing what it always does in November in Scotland. Sometimes it drizzles, sometimes it showers, and occasionally blowing horizontally. And the hills have begun to fade into their winter colours, dark hues of faded heather and dark brown gold of the Dian bracken or ferns. The sort of November where the light changes faster than a Highland mood and where every puddle reflects a sky you can't quite trust. There's a particular texture to a Scottish November, part melancholy, part mischief. The kind of month where the tea tastes just a little bit stronger, the scarves come out of the drawers smelling faintly of summer's neglect, and the first Christmas adverts start appearing before the last of the Halloween pumpkins have been thrown out. It's a time when Scotland seems to shrug its shoulders and say, "Aye, well, that's us for another year then." In towns and villages, life goes on with that familiar mixture of endurance and amusement that seems particularly Scottish. The politicians in Edinburgh continue their endless debates, the rivers are running higher in the glens, and somewhere between the two there are small stories of animals, communities, of laughter in unexpected places. Stories that say as much about the country as any speech or statistic ever could. In today's letter from Scotland, you'll hear about Scotland's newsiest items, where the country's news has been a wonderful patchwork of the noble, the necessary, and the delightfully absurd. You'll hear of senior Scottish politicians, that's in the new Scottish Parliament, by the way, allegedly failing in their duties. Well, nothing new there, I hear you say. You'll hear farmers welcoming the return of beavers. Really? And football fans proudly buying season tickets for some very strange fans. Well, it's all here and much more. And to see some lovely photos of Scotland, have a look at my website, exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk, and please do follow me. I have quite a few photos on my Instagram page as well, and you can find that at exclusive_Scottish_visits. So sit back and enjoy your newsletter from Scotland with John Harbour of Exclusive Scottish Visits on the Unique Scotland podcast. You heard it here first, probably. Well, the first news item has got to be the incredible win by Scotland over Denmark in the Soccer World Cup qualifier. They had to win, and win they did, to qualify for the 2026 Football World Cup, the first time for 28 years, an extraordinary feat for such a wee country. Now, this World Cup will be the first with 48 teams, and hosting of the tournament will be shared between Canada, Mexico and the USA. The final will be played on 19 July 2026 in New York, New Jersey. As you can imagine, the Scots were quite pleased to have qualified at last, and I'd like you to listen to a recording from BBC Scotland with Steve Thompson and James McFadden getting quite excited about the result.
Take it to the corner, take it to the corner. Oh, don't shoot, you're not Pelly. Oh, what a goal, Kenny McLean. He's better than Pelly. Pelly couldn't score from the halfway line. Oh, and it's over. What have we just seen? Oh, wait, I'm having a fuse. We had a dream, and dreams come true.
Wow, can you imagine the recording if we actually won the World Cup? Yes, it was a brilliant result, and we are still celebrating. And so, to the rest of the news. Yes, Minnie, that was so funny. Well, let's begin not in the parliamentary halls of Holyrood, but in the delightfully mossy quiet of Glen Affric, where a small miracle took place. Now, Glen Affric can be found just to the west of Loch Ness, around 30 miles from Drumnadrochit. It's a fabulous scenic drive along single-track roads, so not the easiest place to get to. Anyway, for the first time in 100 years, beavers have been reintroduced north of the Great Glen, an act described by the Times newspaper as a milestone in Scottish rewilding. Beavers are large, semi-aquatic rodents that were hunted to extinction for their fur in the United Kingdom about 400 years ago. They are known for their impressive dam-building skills, which they use to create habitats in freshwater environments. They do play a crucial role in our ecosystems by creating wetlands that support diverse wildlife. In fact, they're often called nature's engineers, with amazing dam-building abilities boosting biodiversity across rivers and floodplains. Planned releases in Scotland have generally been welcomed, but unplanned ones cause some conflict with landowners, as beaver activity has occasionally disrupted farming. In response, some were sadly shot. But today, conservationists focus on translocating or moving beavers to new areas rather than culling them, ensuring that both wildlife and livelihoods are protected. The Glen Affric official release was met with cautious optimism, and one crofter told the Times newspaper, "It's good to have them back, just hope they mind their manners and their dams." Well, it's hard not to be moved by the thought of a creature that vanished centuries ago returning to reshape the land. Quietly, persistently, just like the Scots often do. And it's even harder not to smile when you realise that the same week, further south, another small revolution was taking place, this one involving football, fur and a sense of humour. In the county or kingdom of Fife, the county that boasts St Andrews as one of its towns, you'll find Cowdenbeath Football Club. And that club made national headlines for launching season tickets. Yes, wait for it, for dogs. Well, as the Scottish Sun reported, each canine fan receives its own ID card and a lanyard, granting access to the so-called woof side stand. The club chairman called it a community gesture, though one supporter joked, "The dogs behave better than the fans, and they don't boo at half-time either." Well, apparently the new commercial manager is not only football crazy, but he's also dog mad, and came up with this genius idea of filling the stadiums with well-behaved dogs who are allowed to bring along their well-behaved owners. Only in Scotland, and animal welfare and football fandom meet so happily. Well, it's believed to be the first football club in the world to issue season tickets to dogs, but if you're a supporter of a particular team, football, American football, especially in the USA, and they already issue season tickets to dogs, then please do get in touch, and I'll mention that on my next podcast. There are some ground rules, however. All dogs must be well behaved, kept on a lead, and promise not to chase the ball. They are not permitted in the seating areas or inside the club buildings. They may bark at the referee within reason. And some of the first ticket holders were asked for comment and they all said, "Woof." The great thing about this season ticket is there's no charge for canine friends, and when some opposition supporters were asked about the dog season ticket, they reported to have said they thought it was barking. And talking about barking mad and an organisation going to the dogs, I have to mention some more political shenanigans over the past few weeks in the Scottish Parliament. I really thought by the time of going to press with this newsletter from Scotland, the ferry fiasco at the Ferguson Marine Shipbuilding Yard at Port Glasgow would be over, but how wrong I am. Now, I've commented on this shipbuilding saga, this horror story, for nearly 2 years. You know, it's the one where two small ferries are 3 times over cost and over 5 years late. Well, turning to the Scottish Daily Express, This long-running saga at Ferguson Marine is back in the headlines. And surprise, surprise, the Scottish Government once again facing heat over how it handled the whole thing. And so here's what happened. The latest. A secret briefing has revealed that despite overseeing nearly £500 million of public money being pumped into the troubled shipyard, ministers are still refusing to take any blame for what's been called one of Scotland's biggest ever procurement disasters. Instead, they're pointing the finger squarely at the pre-nationalisation leadership. Basically, the team that was running Ferguson Marine before the government took over. Well, let's rewind a little bit. Ferguson Marine, the Port Glasgow shipyard, was given the contract 8 years ago to build 2 small, new Caledonian McBrain ferries. And Caledonian McBrain is the company that provides a lifeline to the islands off the coast of Scotland. It was meant to be a proud moment. Scottish-built ships for Scottish waters. And the Scottish National Party even celebrated the deal at their party conference. The only problem? From there, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And what started as a £97 million project has now ballooned to approximately £500 million. The 2 ferries, the Glen Sannox and the Glen Rosa, were supposed to set sail in 2018 and 2019 respectively. But while the Glen Sannox finally limped into service last December, that's 5 years overdue, the Glen Rosa is still not finished. And the shipyard, well, it's been through chaos, management disputes, cost overruns, and eventually collapse. The Scottish Government had to step in and nationalise the yard just to keep it afloat. Well, now in the latest behind-the-closed-doors briefing, ministers have reportedly insisted that all the delays and cost blowouts were down to the old management, not their own oversight, which understandably has left critics furious. Opposition parties are calling it a total whitewash. They say that no one in government has ever been held accountable, not a single minister has lost their job, even though taxpayers have footed a bill that's now 4 or even 5 times higher than planned. And that, for a lot of Scots watching the ferries still not running on island routes, their lifeline to their homes, feels like rubbing salt into the wound. So here we are, another twist in the ferry fiasco. A secret briefing, no acceptance of the blame, and still no clear end to one of Scotland's most expensive transport embarrassments. And just to get another story about politics out of the way, there's been quite a bit of drama in Scotland's Parliament this week during debates on the Scotland Heritage Organisation. And it all came to a head at the Holyrood Scottish Parliament Culture Committee. BBC Scotland reported that the Culture Secretary, Angus Robertson, had admitted, wait for it, he's never actually met with the Board of Historic Environment Scotland. And that's the very important public body in charge of our castles, monuments and other historic sites during his time in the job. Nope, not once. And this all came out while he was being grilled by MSPs, that's members of the Scottish Parliament, about a whole series of scandals that have been rocking Historic Environment Scotland lately, and honestly, it sounds like the plot of a political drama. We're talking everything from senior management accused of twerking in front of an actor, Martin Compston, at a corporate event in Edinburgh Castle, and there's other things I'll come to shortly, but I had to look up twerking on Wikipedia. And it tells me, and I quote, it's a type of dance to popular music in a sexually provocative manner involving throwing or thrusting the hips back or shaking the buttocks, often in a low squatting stance. That's unquote. Sadly, I don't have the name of the senior manager who was thrusting their buttocks towards Martin Compston, but you know who you are, as does Martin, of course. Further reports talk of staff getting free or discounted meals at the Castle restaurant, and even allegations of racism and sexual harassment. The organisation's chief executive, Katrina Brown, has only just returned to work after months away from her post, while other staff members are reportedly suspended as investigations continue. When questioned about it all, Mr Robertson, the Culture Minister, didn't hold back. He said the problems at Historic Environment Scotland were, quote, of a different magnitude to anything the government's seen before. Well, how true he is. And here's the part that really got the committee members riled up. Opposition MSPs pointed out that Robertson hasn't had any formal meetings with the HES, that's the Historic Environment Scotland, board, or even its previous chair, Hugh Hall. Not in the 4.5 years he's been in the post. This has been called a dereliction of duty and accused Robertson of being asleep at the wheel. I love the political quotes. Robertson, for his part, pushed back. He said he'd spoken to the HES chief executive and that his senior officials have been attending every board meeting, wait for it, since the problems came to light. In other words, he has been advised about the situation, just not in person, and only when it came into the public domain. Mr. Kerr, who was on the committee, said viewers would be astonished by Robertson's arrogant refusal to apologise, adding the minister only stepped in after the organisation was already in meltdown. And remember, Historic Environment Scotland isn't small potatoes. It receives over £70 million a year in taxpayer funding. So the big question hanging over all of this is, how did things get so bad? And why wasn't anyone paying closer attention? Well, we'll be keeping an eye on how this one unfolds, because when your national heritage body is under fire for scandals at the most prestigious castle in Scotland, Edinburgh, and your culture secretary admits he's never met the board, well, that's quite the plot twist in Scotland's ongoing political saga. Still, that's politics in Scotland. It's always been less about the shouting and more about staying power, or perhaps even staying in power. The same could be said for the voters, of course, who've learned to treat every new scandal with a kind of weary humour. As one taxi driver told the BBC, they're all saying the country's going to the dogs, which is fine as long as the dogs have season tickets. Actually, I made that last bit up. Beyond the Parliament and the press, life in the country continues in small, steady ways. The Highland Gamekeepers Association is fretting about dwindling grouse numbers. The Financial Times wrote recently that the sport of kings is under pressure from both weather and politics. Now, grouse shooting is a traditional field sport in the United Kingdom, primarily involving the shooting of red grouse. The season starts on what is termed the Glorious 12th, which refers to August the 12th, marking the start of the shooting season for red grouse in Great Britain and Northern Ireland. This day is significant in the British sporting calendar, attracting hunting enthusiasts to the moors for the traditional event. It's a long-standing tradition that plays an important role in countryside culture and rural economy. Now, it's easy to dismiss it as a pastime for the privileged, but the reality is more complicated, with whole rural economies depending upon those August shoots. And without them, well, many communities face a quieter kind of extinction. Still, as one gamekeeper told the paper, "If it's not the weather or the government, the ticks will get you. You've got to laugh or you'll greet." Moving from the Highlands to the Islands, the winds that whip across the Orkney Islands in November are something you'll remember if you visit around this time of year. And up there in Kirkwall, the capital of Orkney, you'll find the PDC just off the shore. And for the last 30 years, there's been a bonfire and fireworks display for Guy Fawkes Night, and it's been a cherished event for the local community. Well, the fireworks are no more. It would appear that the noise of the fireworks has distressed local swan populations and other birds in the area. And it was the Scottish Sun newspaper that noted the decision was made to protect bird life nesting near the PDC. Locals were disappointed, of course, but many accepted it with the stoicism only islanders possess. "If the birds have learned to nest here," one man told the reporter, "then maybe it's our turn to find somewhere else to make the noise." There's something deeply Scottish about that sentiment, the idea that nature always gets the last word, and we just have to work around her. So if the headlines always seem a bit gloomy, it's these smaller stories that offer light relief. Now, turning to Scone Palace, the magazine What's On in Renfrewshire reports that the Scottish Game Fair welcomed families, falconers and fans of rare native breeds like the Dandy Dinmont Terrier, that gloriously grumpy little dog named after Sir Walter Scott's character. And Scone Palace, near the city of Perth, is the ancestral seat of the Earls of Mansfield, a fabulous castellated Wren sandstone building, an example of the Gothic revival style in Scotland. Scone was originally the site of an early Christian church and later an Augustinian priory, and of course the grounds of the palace for centuries held the Stone of Scone, or the Stone of Destiny, upon which the early kings of Scotland were crowned. Indeed, Robert the Bruce himself was crowned at Scone in 1306. The last coronation, Charles II, when he accepted the Scottish crown in 1651. Viscount William Stormont, the current heir to the earldom, is overseeing a significant transformation to enhance its visitor attraction, which is part of a £10 million development plan, and William is very much hands-on. Families wandered among the Highland ponies, the archery targets, they tasted local foods, and watched craftsmen at work. There's an understated artistry to this event, the country's culture distilled into a single weekend of hands-on heritage. The Scottish Game Fair weekend is a reminder of Scotland's culture. For all its debates about the future, it still enjoys the oddities of the past. And perhaps that's the heart of it, a country in constant conversation with itself, half in earnest, half in jest. And so, as we leave the beavers to their dams, the dogs to their half-time biscuits, and turn our attention to sport in its quieter, more generous forms, this time I'd like to tell you about not football, not the high-stakes spectacle that fills stadiums, but the kind of games that remind you why communities endure. In Edinburgh this week, What's On in Edinburgh reported the largest walking rugby event in Scotland. Yes, walking rugby. Now, it's modified non-contact version of the traditional rugby designed for players of all ages and abilities, emphasising inclusivity and social interaction. It's a slower-paced adaptation of a rugby that allows individuals who may not be able to participate in the traditional game due to age, injury or physical limitations to enjoy this sport. And it's played at walking pace, meaning that players must always have at least 1 foot on the ground, and running is not permitted. Matches typically consist of 2 teams, each with up to 7 players. The game can be played on a smaller pitch, with dimensions adjusted based upon the number of players. Walking rugby is more than just a game, it's a celebration of health, community and inclusivity, making it a fantastic option for anyone looking to stay active and engaged in a fun environment. In Edinburgh's event, the field was alive with participants of all ages and abilities, moving at a pace more contemplative than competitive. The whistle sounded, but it was not a call to victory, more a gentle encouragement to take the next step. And between each slow-motion pass and careful try, laughter punctuated the morning air. There's something profoundly comforting in walking rugby, a sport that values presence over performance, community over competition, in effect, participation over winning. And while walking rugby offered gentle camaraderie, the Highland Games reminded the country of its more boisterous traditions. As reported by the Scottish Business News, Stirling's Highland Games, recently secured with new sponsorship, continues to celebrate a rugged pageantry, caber tossing, hammer throwing and piping competitions with Highland dancers and swirling kilts. Festivities were thoroughly enjoyed by many local people, but also many a foreign visitor to Stirling as well. Not quite sure what any foreigner makes of the games, of course, but they're fun all the same. These gatherings are more than sport. They're a living archive where generations meet, muscles strain, and laughter echoes across the glens. It's where young and old learn the enduring lesson that Scottish tradition are taken very seriously, but also that camaraderie is as important as competitiveness. Meanwhile, in the quieter corners of the country, communities are finding ways to express themselves beyond competition and spectacle. The Sunday Post reported that a Facebook page called Neilston News is a tongue-in-cheek satirical news page about village life. Neilston is a small village about 10 miles southwest of Glasgow. The creator, Stuart Mackenzie, started the page when bored on his daily train commute, writing spoof news stories about the old video store in the village before broadening its focus to Neilston in general. The page gained a sizable local following, almost 4,500 Facebook likes at the time of the report, by sharing humorous takes on village goings-on and ribbing neighbouring villages, for example Barrhead. A calendar featuring a spoof story about the village or a local person for each month was sold online, and the profits were donated to local good causes. It turned what could have been just another Facebook page into a small social enterprise. The creator opted not to profit personally, instead giving the calendar proceeds back to the village. The Sunday Post goes on to report that it shows how a small place like Milestone, which historically is a village with strong local identity, can embrace modern online culture while staying rooted in community. It's clever, it's self-aware, it's a reminder that humour can be a powerful force for community cohesion. And speaking of humour, we must not overlook the viral moment this week from Glasgow, as reported in The Guardian newspaper. A teacher, Torgy Squire, posted a short TikTok about the unpredictability of Scottish summer weather. The post, which poked affectionate fun at drizzle and sudden downpours, ignited interest far beyond the Clyde. African American audiences engaged with the hashtags like #BlackScottishTikTok, sparking transatlantic conversations about the identity, humour, and the Scottish experience. We often say that if you can see the mountains, it's going to rain. If you can't see them, it's raining. A wee story of my own regarding a golf match I was playing with some old colleagues. The organiser had sent out a circular telling us where to be and when. He also mentioned that the weather could be inclement. At the bottom of the instruction he wrote, "It should be a good day, but in case of rain we will have to adopt a wet weather routine, which usually incorporates a covered option, perhaps at a driving range." Anyway, underneath that instruction was the heading, "Wet weather routine," and all it said was, "Get wet." Well, as we continue our journey through Scotland this November, we leave behind the cabers and community halls and venture into the more curious corners, the castles, the islands, those isolated places that remind one why this country has always inspired the imagination. First, the dream of owning a castle, a fantasy that seems attainable only in fairy tales. Well, in Scotland it's taken on a very real form. The Shuna Island Estate, that's Shuna, off the west coast, has gone on sale for approximately £5.5 million, as reported by the Sky News. It was actually sold in 2012 for £2 million, so not a bad investment. Well, Shuna is in Loch Linnhe on the west coast of Scotland and is approximately 2 kilometres long and 1 kilometre wide and extends to some 155 hectares, that's 383 acres in total. The name Shuna comes from the Norse for sea island and is separated from the mainland by the Sound of Shuna. In the late 60s... Sorry, that's my dog. She's dreaming. Minnie, keep quiet. I'm sorry about that. The name Shuna comes from the Norse for sea island and is separated from the mainland by the Sound of Shuna. In the late 16th century, the island belonged to John Stewart, the Laird of Appin. The Tower House castle he built now lies in ruins at the south end of the island and was replaced in the 18th century by Shuna Farmhouse. So the £5 million price tag is a starter for 10, and a wee bit further investment may be required. However, you might picture yourself wandering the shores, keys in hand, contemplating the life of a Scottish laird, and you would never be lonely, as there's a very large herd of sheep on the island to keep you company. And my next story is about another castle for sale. And this was advertised by Rep Moves and Savills, and it's Kinloch Castle on the Isle of Rum, one of the small isles to the south of the Isle of Skye, and it's been listed for offers over $750,000 by Nature Scott. Not a bad price, and I can already detect a few ears pricking up at the news. But the new owner must demonstrate how they will support the island community and its natural environment. Kinloch Castle was actually built around 1897 as a luxurious retreat for Sir George Bullock, a wealthy textile tycoon from Yorkshire. This Edwardian-style castle features a rectangular shape, crenellated towers and an elaborate interiors, including a ballroom and library. And I'm just reading the information from the website, 31,000 square feet and 20 bedrooms. Well, the grandeur of this fabulous 19th century castle has a spectacular view over the Bay of Rum, so might just be worth the effort of a move north. So if you're sitting in a London or a New York apartment of medium size, sell up and head to Rum and become literally king of your own castle. And it's not just humans who are considering changing their habitat. For example, somewhere in the Highlands there has been an illegal release of lynx, which caused a stir this week, according to The Guardian. 2 Eurasian lynx were captured and quarantined after being found wandering around outside authorised conservation areas. Now, as many of you will know, Scotland has a policy of the right to roam, which is enshrined in Scottish law, allowing anyone to access any land in Scotland, with a few exceptions. It would appear that no one has informed the lynx that this law did not apply to them. Bless them. Meanwhile, a place where restrictions on humans are being enforced, and that is in Dundee, the Howth Secret Supper Club. It's an underground, invitation-only culinary experience, and it's been named Scotland's Restaurant of the Year by the Scottish Sun. Guests access the space through a hidden cooking academy, and the menu is as much about surprise as it is about sustenance. It's a reminder that Scotland's creativity often thrives in corners, underground or otherwise, where tradition and modernity meet in unexpected ways. Well, finally, it's impossible to speak of Scotland without acknowledging the human communities that make it home. The village of Neilson's satirical Facebook page, the Highland Games enthusiasts, and the families tending to islands or exploring ruins all exemplify a delicate balance between the whimsical and the serious. And it's this balance that allows us to consider in the same breath both the purchase of a private island and the quiet dignity of a small town maintaining its traditions. Scotland in these November days is a tapestry of contradictions, the majestic and the mundane, the wild and the tamed, the absurd and the earnest. In every castle, every island, every village hall and every secret supper club, there's a story waiting always for someone to notice. As our November journey across Scotland draws to a close, it's perhaps fitting to pause and reflect on the deeper rhythms of this country, the resilience, the humour and the quiet heroism that often escapes the headlines. While politicians debate, villagers fundraise through satire, families brave unpredictable weather, and teachers capture international attention with humour, they all illustrate the small acts that shape daily life here. And then there's the enduring allure of the country itself, its castles, private islands, hills dusted with early snow, and forests reclaiming space from centuries past. The sale of Shuna Island and Kinloch Castle, reported by the Scottish Sun and Savills, remind us that fantasy can intersect with reality, though one must always be mindful of the weather, neighbours and the sheer scale of maintenance. Scotland is such a country of contrasts. You can travel from the quiet, contemplative walking rugby fields to the riotous Highland Games in under 1 hour. You can witness the grace of a dandy Dinmont terrier at a game fair and in the next village encounter a viral TikTok about summer showers. You can consider a private island purchase and in the same breath hear of a local fundraiser knitting together community, creativity and purpose. It is, I think, this capacity for balance that defines Scotland today. The country can be serious without solemnity, whimsical without frivolity, and grounded without losing its imagination. It's a place where history whispers from the castle ruins, where the present hums in village halls and the online screens, and where the future, however uncertain, is approached with both resilience and laughter. And so, as another November evening folds itself around Scotland, with mists on the hills and the squawk of migrating geese, we're left with the sound of the rain, steady, familiar and somehow reassuring. It falls on the rooftops of Edinburgh and the lochs of the Highlands alike, on crofters and commuters, gamekeepers and school teachers, on those dreaming of islands and those content with a corner shop and a cup of tea. This, perhaps, is the quiet secret of the place, that its stories, however small, all seem to belong to one another. beavers reshaping riversides, political shenanigans, dogs with season tickets, castles for sale, and communities finding laughter in the unlikeliest of corners. Together they form the kind of portrait no painter could quite capture, but every Scot would recognise. It's easy to think of Scotland as a land of grand gestures, of battles, of ballads, of bagpipes, but listen closely and you'll find its true character in the smaller sounds: a door closing against the wind, a laugh shared in a village hall, a kind word spoken over the counter of a shop on a wet morning. And so, as the mist settles over the glens and the lamps glow in kitchen windows, we can close this month's newsletter from Scotland with a quiet assurance that Scotland, in all its moods and contradictions, remain what it's always been: a country that endures, amuses and astonishes all at the same time. Well, that brings to an end this letter from Scotland, and it's been a delight to have you with me for this short tour of Scotland's news headlines, both serious and fun. Back to my touring podcast of Scotland next month, and I'll be covering the Scottish clan system, looking particularly at the MacDonalds and MacLeods of Skye. There's one or two other clans I'll mention, including my own clan, Mackay, fierce warriors from the north of Scotland. And breaking news, I am deeply honoured to have been appointed as the new president of the Clan Mackay Society of Scotland, and more about this appointment in future episodes. I certainly look forward to working with the presidents of other Mackay clan societies from all around the world. And thank you to all who have been in touch to tell me how much you've enjoyed my podcasts and how they've helped you on your own journey around this wonderful country. Nice to hear from Lindsay Leckie, and delighted to hear about your self-guided trip to Scotland and that you incorporated many of the places that I suggested along your path. I feel truly honoured to have been on your journey with you. Before I close, I would like to take this opportunity to wish all my American listeners a very happy Thanksgiving on 27th of November. And as this is the last podcast of 2025, may I wish all my listeners a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Well, if you wish to get in touch or comment on anything else that you've heard here, or indeed to book a tour, get in touch with me through my website at exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. My very best wishes to you, wherever you are in the world. And I now raise my glass with a wee dram of whisky to you in Scottish traditional fashion. Slán Java.
You've been listening to the Unique Scotland podcast with exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk. To receive all our episodes automatically, please subscribe now.